Welcome to Coachable Wealth, where we blend the worlds of sports and finance to bring you strategies as you navigate your wealth building journey. John, Cody, and Sean are here to help you elevate your financial advisor relationship to meet your long-term goals. Now let's get to it.
I went for a long, nice hike yesterday on Easter, spent some time with family. It was a good weekend.
Yeah, I also we got out on Saturday and hit up the local rail trail here, and I think we ended up doing almost 8 miles. I mean,
Oh, wow, nice.
you get out and you start walking. Before you know it, you're like, hey, we're at like 4 miles. We got to head back. Over a 2-hour trot, I think.
Yeah, same. I did some time on the trail, running and biking, and then I played the most relaxing sport known to man of golf.
Love it.
It is relaxing sometimes. Other times it's very frustrating. But I feel like you played in the scramble this weekend, right, Sean?
Yeah, so the pressure was off for my first round of the year. It's just the first hole since basically September was over a lake, and I think 3 out of 4 of us were in the water, and that was 5 minutes into the whole thing.
Yeah, that's the one thing. The one bad thing about scrambles when they do like that shotgun start, and you never know what hole you're gonna start at. Yeah, starting on a par 3 that's over water isn't ideal.
It's my first shot in 6 months.
That's a long par 3 on that course too, isn't it? Like 190 yards or close?
Yeah, almost. Yeah, close to 200. Yeah.
Is that the 18th?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that is long. Did you have any consistencies strong off the tee or short game, or where were you at?
Consistency, absolutely not. I think I hit some of the best shots of my life, followed by some of the most "what are you doing" moments. But there were a few I got a hold of, so I was happy about that.
Nice. Were you guys able to watch any basketball or baseball over the weekend?
Yeah, I watched quite a bit of March Madness. Unfortunately, my predictions are completely busted.
Me too.
I had North Carolina winning it, and they lost in a close one to Alabama Thursday night. So I'm kind of just watching it now for upsets to happen.
Yep, I'm the same way. I had Houston winning it all. So whenever their best player got hurt halfway through the first half of the game, I knew it wasn't going to be a good finish. So they lost to Duke there, unfortunately.
Yeah, I spent some time watching some March Madness. Love to see NC State, underdog pulling through, and I think I don't know why, but just Duke is one of those teams that's just hard for me to root for. Maybe because they're so good every year. Then also watch the Phillies off to a typical Philadelphia Philly hot start this season.
Yeah, real hot, especially Friday and Saturday. Those were great games for the Phillies.
Yeah, they kind of walked into game 1 and 2 with all this preseason hype. And I don't know if you guys saw it. I think it was MLB.com. They ranked the Phillies to have the best bullpen. And then they absolutely imploded in game 1 on Friday.
Oh, yeah, especially Wheeler pitched a gem in game 1. Obviously, it's tough to start the season going against the Braves, who you can make the argument that they're one of the top 2 teams with the Dodgers. I mean, the Orioles are really good too, but the Braves just have so much firepower in their offense, and their pitching's really good too. So obviously it's a tough, 3-game start to the schedule, but at least they were able to pull out one on Sunday, especially because that was a come from behind win too.
Yeah, there's the Braves. I mean, basically 1 through 8. I mean, there's no reprieve. Everybody can hit.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It was good to see the Philly fans giving Strider some of the hometown treatment in the bullpen before the game a little bit.
I saw that, and then they were chanting almost the entire game too, like what they did in the NLDS last year.
Yeah,
he is crazy good. I know he let up some runs, but what do you have, like 8 or 9 strikeouts on Friday?
Yeah,
I mean the Phillies were winning going in, like you said, John, into the 7th or 8th inning, and the bullpen just completely blew it.
I'll tell you what, though, Saturday, I mean, you got to give the fans credit. That almost felt like on TV, like a playoff atmosphere.
Yeah,
like game 2 of the season.
Yeah, unfortunately they ended up getting destroyed, but at least they came back on Sunday and pulled out the win. Ranger looked pretty good. The first inning was a little bit of a struggle. He let up a 2-run home run, but then he settled in and pitched really well.
Yeah. Hopefully, I don't know, just looking ahead here in the schedule, I mean, the Phillies have a chance to really jump out strong here if they can put it together for the month of April, I mean, they got a pretty reasonable schedule.
That would be a nice surprise compared to what the last couple of years have been. What were they, like 10 games under 500 last year at the end of April or May? I
Yeah.
forget which month it was, but they were so far. They were like almost 20 games back from the Braves.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like by June, they were like 15 games out of the NL East or something like that.
Yeah, like you're not going to catch up from that much down. But obviously, baseball is a very long season, so hopefully they can start hitting and getting the team back on track.
I feel like, I don't know, Sean, you can probably speak to it. Just like football, I mean, where every game really counts. I mean, high school, what are you talking? 10-game season, NFL, 17, 18-game regular season, college football. What are we at? 12 games now? And then you got the Major League Baseball, 162 games. I mean,
Man, that is
such a long season.
That is a marathon. Football's a little different. You get one a week.
Yeah.
So when you win or lose one, it really sticks with you for, 6 days. Whereas baseball, I mean, you're on a plane the next day and right back at it. So I don't think you can let a win or a loss really eat at you in baseball because you got to get right back out there.
Yeah.
And I think, the last couple of years we at least in this area, have just grown accustomed to, well, this is how the Phillies start, let's see how we're doing in September.
Yeah.
When they get hot. But it would be nice for them to start strong and not have to play catch up, especially when the Braves, who probably have the second best lineup on paper in baseball behind the Dodgers, are in the same division. I mean, the Braves are they've never beat the Phillies in a postseason series, believe it or not. But you got to figure, how long can you keep that up? It's not going to be something that lasts forever. So it would be nice to win a division here.
How many years in a row did the Braves win that NL East?
Oh, they were in the teens there.
So is that streak still going? Like, when was the last time another team won the NL East? It might be like 10 straight since the Phillies had control in the 2000s.
I feel like when the Nationals won the World Series, I think they were a wild card.
Jeez.
I think they were one of those teams that got super hot at the end of the season and just kind of rode that wave through the playoffs.
It looks like the last Nationals won in 2017. Ever since 2017, the Braves have won every single year.
I think back in the heyday, like when the Braves had like Maddox and Glavine, I mean, I feel like they won like 14 in a row or something like that.
From 95 to 2005.
Yeah.
10 straight. And then the Phillies took control and won for 5 years. And then it was kind of back and forth between the National Braves, Mets. It's honestly crazy how good the Braves have been for so long. And you can make the argument this is their best team. Like, their pitching's even better now.
Yeah.
Especially if Chris Sale stays healthy. Kind of going back to what Sean was saying about football, you have like at least a week or sometimes 2 weeks if you have a bye week before your next game, compared to baseball where you most likely you're playing the next day. Would you think of that as a positive or potentially a negative?
From a coaching and a player standpoint, I look at it as a positive. There is nothing worse than, as a player when you feel, or a coach, maybe you made the wrong call or you didn't make the play, you dropped a pass and you have to wait a whole week to go out and do it again. Obviously you practice, but it's not the same. When you play 162 games, I'm sure that part of it is good. The next day it's like, once the first pitch goes off, I'm sure you forget all about it and you're just locked in.
Yeah, I think of it as a positive too, unless you're in a very bad slump, which happens in baseball. So if you think of like Turner last year to start the season was playing awful compared to his standards. And then obviously he turned it around after the Philly fans did something completely different compared to normal, where normally they would have booed him. They gave him a standing ovation and seemed to turn it around. But I do think it's probably more of a positive, unless you're in a slump like that. Then it probably really gets into your head that, oh man, here's another game that I'm potentially going to struggle, depending on how their mental game is.
I remember thinking back to the Phillies last year when we were just talking about how they just kind of started out in a massive slump for the first couple months. And I remember just watching the post-game press conferences, and the Phillies manager, every game, he's like, yeah, we're going to get out of this. We're going to get out of this. We just need the reps. And it was almost rinse and repeat every day. He just kept saying the same thing. But, I mean, eventually, after the All-Star break, they did bounce out of it. So I think it is a positive that you can play every day and kind of, again, get those reps, consistency, and you'll eventually bounce out of it. Keep doing the right things.
I mean, I've never played baseball at that high of a level, but I'd imagine that you're not even close to your peak form at this point in the
Oh
season.
yeah, no,
Spring training seems like it just flies by.
yeah.
I heard, I think it was Mike Schmidt yesterday during the broadcast of the game. He said the most injuries can occur within the first 2 weeks of the season, just because kind of what you guys were saying, the players really aren't fully ramped up, the pitchers aren't stretched out, and this is kind of when a lot of the injuries occur in the
Oh
first.
yeah, especially when you have a player like Harper diving over the railing in the second game of the season. But no, hopefully the Phillies finally get off to a good start this year. It was a tough 3 games to start the season against the Braves, but hopefully they get off to a good start. So we are officially in a new quarter going forward into 2024. Do you guys have any specific thoughts on the first quarter of 2024? Whether it's regarding the planning side, anything on inflation, any specific headlines or thoughts that come top of mind to you guys?
Yeah, so I could talk about one how obviously the first quarter was great for the stock market. Going back to 1950, of the 16 times the stock market was up in the first quarter over 8%, 15 of those 16 times the stock market had another 9% to add on to it. So only one time did the market end lower when it had a first quarter of 8% or higher, which I thought was pretty interesting going back to 1950.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that's a good outlook going forward. And I know we were talking about it a little bit earlier today before we started the podcast, but it would almost be a little healthy to have a little bit of a sell-off here in the stock market. Not a huge sell-off or anything, but being up 10% in a quarter isn't exactly normal, especially with how positive the returns were last year in 2023. So if you continue at the 10% place the S&P 500's at, that's a 40% return for the year. So I don't think anybody's projecting that going forward. So it is, good to bring it back to what your expectations should be going forward too.
Yeah. I think too, just we're starting to see a little bit broadening of the stock market.
Yep.
I mean, we kind of finished year end and went in the Q1 of 2024. Everyone's talking about the Magnificent Seven. I know that's kind of fizzled out a little bit. I think they're now calling it the Magnificent Four, I believe.
Fab Four.
Fab Four, yeah.
Tying it back into March Madness.
Yeah. I guess Apple, Tesla, and Alphabet are struggling a little bit. They're lagging. But NVIDIA, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, they're still pushing along pretty strongly.
Tesla's actually down almost 30% so far year to date, and they're still off almost 50% from their all-time highs. Apple's down almost double digits to start the year. Google is up 8% year to date, but that's lower than 10% of the S&P 500. So you were saying, John, it's good to see it broadening out from the stock market. And it's not just the S&P 500. So we have international stocks up over 5%, small cap stocks up over 5%, emerging markets up 2 to 3%. So if you project those returns out for the whole year, you're looking at well over double-digit returns.
I saw something too. They're talking about the average person who's contributing to a 401k, if it's bi-monthly contributions from their payroll. I think they said 75% of those dollars are going into some form of large cap holding.
Wow.
Which is kind of funneling into that Magnificent Seven. I mean, the Apples, the Microsofts. But to your point, Cody, I think that broadening of the market is a great outlook looking forward.
Yeah.
I think tying it back to baseball, how long did people have to wait for international to start holding up their end of the bargain? It seemed like it was a lot of years. A lot of people were high on international, just seemed to never pan out. Then all of a sudden, you have Japan having a record year.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. There was a big inflation number on Friday, even with the stock market closed. There was still a big core PCE reading on Friday, which the Fed says that's the number that they look at the most because that strips out energy and food prices. So it was good to see that continue to come down. So it was 2.9% last month. For this month, it's 2.8% year over year. So still above their 2% target. But if we just look back to this time in last year in 2023, it was almost 5%. So now being down to 2.8%, it's good to see inflation continue to fall.
I don't know. Grocery store prices are still pretty inflated. I know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I don't think we'll ever see deflation,
Right.
but it's good to see that the inflation is slowing down.
Right. And it looks like I guess the housing sector. I mean, just if you're in the market for a new house, I mean, it's still pretty rough out there
Yeah,
with the fair market values, interest rates. I mean, it's still not the opportune time to buy a new property.
no, it'll be interesting to see. I know the Fed said, was it last week or a couple weeks ago, that obviously they didn't cut interest rates in March, but they're potentially looking at 3 cuts this year. So it'll be interesting to see what the mortgage rates do whenever they finally start cutting interest rates.
I think a lot of that has to do with location. I mean, it's just there is no availability around the Lehigh Valley at all. And I think there's a ton of people looking to move. And I think a lot of it has to do with you still have people wanting to move out of cities
Yeah.
or maybe across the river to pay some less taxes from New Jersey. I wonder, not that we're in an area, but I would love to know what the real estate market is like in some smaller, maybe more rural areas of the state and see if it's still like that, because it's insane.
Yeah, it seems like when a house goes up for sale, it's selling within a week or two.
So they said the average, I was at a real estate conference the other week, the average time on market is 20 days, which means you got a lot of homes that are going in, probably 10 days. And there's probably a few that are real fixer-uppers that are, taking a month or so to sell.
Yeah.
And if no house went on the market at all, there'd only be a 2 to 3 week supply of houses left. Which, and like a good real estate market, when homes are affordable, interest rates are good, you're looking at a 2 to 3 month, window of homes available if no more houses went on sale.
Wow.
If no house went on sale, every house would be gone in 2 weeks.
That's crazy.
Wow.
So going into the second quarter, are there any particular things that come to mind for whether it's on the planning side or the investing side?
I think you said it a little bit ago, Cody. Just potential with the Fed, cutting rates up to 3 times this year, which could be 75 bips potentially. I know it's not a huge number, but do you think just that reduction in the interest rates, like say there's still a lot of cash sitting out there in the sidelines in money markets or savings accounts, I mean, potentially getting up to the 5%.
Yep.
Do you think when they do cut it, if they do it 3 times, that's a good discussion for people to, hey, maybe potentially take some of that cash and move it into the market?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think you should be doing that now before cutting, because whenever they do cut, the first, interest rate that's going to drop is the money market. And potentially you're not going to get the principal increase that you would, or you definitely won't get the principal increase on money markets. But if you're investing in bonds, you're locking in the duration. So how long, the bonds have till they mature, and also the interest rate that they're paying right now. And if when the Fed does cut interest rates, you'll still get around that same yield, but potentially a principal increase, which means a price appreciation on the bond. So if you have money that you're not looking to use within the next 6 to 12 months, you should definitely be talking to your financial advisor about, what do you do with these assets? And if you want to be more conservative with it, now is a really good time to start looking at fixed income, whether it's, inside of an IRA and doing corporate bonds, or if it's in a brokerage account and looking at municipal bonds, depending on what your tax bracket's at.
On a planning side, just with tax day approaching here, I know we're at April 1st and we're 2.5, 3 weeks from the tax deadline. I mean, if you haven't, you can still contribute to your traditional IRAs or Roth IRAs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good time to do that too, to have a conversation with your advisor. If you have not done that, you still have a little bit of time to get that completed.
Yeah, good point. Anything top of mind for you, Sean, going into the second quarter?
So same as you guys, I'm really interested to see if the Fed is going to stick with their word. It seems like they haven't always in the past, or they've maybe delayed when they were going to start lowering interest rates. I know in 2022, people probably thought, in 2023, at the end of the year, they're going to start lowering interest rates. And now we're second quarter of 24, and they're talking about doing it 3 times by the end of the year. Well, is that going to happen the second quarter? Are there going to be 3 rate cuts at the end of the year? Interested to see, but I think you're right, Cody. Now is the time, I believe, to get into bonds so you can get that premium increase, that you won't see in a money market.
Yeah, I mean, I think to start this year, there were a lot of people who thought there was going to be at least 4 to 5 cuts. If you look at just the 10-year Treasury, which is a big standard for what the bond market thinks the Fed's going to do to start this year, the 10-year Treasury was at 3.85%. Now it's all the way up to 4.25. And that's just from the market pricing in that the Fed isn't going to cut near as much as they thought. And I think one important thing to point out to, whether it's clients or people who don't follow the bond market that much is even though the 10-year Treasury went from 3.8 to 4.2, normally that move would mean you would have a loss in bonds if you already bought the bonds. But since we started at a much higher yield on fixed income, even though we've had a rise in interest rates inside the bond market, fixed income's flat for the year. So when you think about the complete opposite of that, when the Fed does start cutting interest rates, you're locking in that yield that you're getting on fixed income, and you'll potentially see a actual price appreciation on the bonds. So people that are close to retirement or don't want to take on as much risk, this is a really good time for them to start looking at the fixed income market.
And I guess the other story, just kind of looking if they do continue and talk about cutting the rates, is I guess in the small cap space.
Yep.
I mean, just because lending credit right now, obviously they're looking out pretty long on the duration scale. I mean, if they do start to cut rates a little bit, they're going to be able to access some cash at a lesser rate. So, I mean, that's going to help out small caps going forward too.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see whenever they do start cutting interest rates, what that does to the different sectors inside the stock market. I do think it is interesting to point out, and I know we touched briefly on international, but since the lows in 2022, international has actually outperformed the S&P 500. And I think that's often overlooked from a lot of investors. Tech stocks are up the most, but then international is actually on a whole outperforming the S&P 500 from the lows in 2022.
I've seen some quarter one, like 2024 numbers here, and they're just looking at like the last decade of S&P 500. I mean, I think from 2014 to 2023, it was up like over 200%.
Yeah.
I mean, just some of the returns are astronomical.
Looking at like an average of a 20% annual return. And that's with all the huge declines that we saw in 2020. I mean, 2020 was the fastest bear market ever. We went down 30% in pretty much 1 month, and we rebounded quick. And then 2022 was just really dragged out, pretty much a complete wash for all of equities and even fixed income too.
Right.
So I guess before the next time we do our podcast, we'll be towards the national championship for March Madness. Who are you guys rooting for? Who do you think will win?
As I said, I would love to see the upset, just because my original predictions are out. But I'm going to go with the number one seeds. I think we're going to see Purdue, UConn.
And then who do you think is going to win?
I think UConn. I don't see anybody beating them after their 30-0 run they had after halftime the other night.
I saw that they've led every single game in March Madness by at least 30 points. That is just crazy.
So the other night, they were, I think it was like 25-23 heading into halftime.
Yep.
And literally, I turned it on like 5 minutes into the second, and they were up almost 30 points, and they won a 30-0 run.
Yeah, Insane. I'm the same way. I would love to see somehow NC State pull an upset, or even Alabama pull an upset over UConn. But I do think it's going to be UConn winning it all, probably over Purdue. I know big guy for North Carolina State is playing really well, but I think he's going to have a different struggle when he goes against Edey for Purdue.
DJ Burns.
Yeah.
I'll be the outlier. I've already picked Indiana State, who didn't even make the tournament. So I'll pick. I got UConn and NC State.
And then UConn winning, or NC State pulling off the huge upset and beating UConn?
No, I don't think anyone's touching UConn.
Yeah, I think UConn is going to win it all. Also,
big Jimmy V fan, so it's good to see NC State back for the first time since Jimmy Valvano. Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
What, 1983? 86?
The year after Villanova won, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we touched on that in our last podcast, how there's been no seed above an 8 seed to win it all. Maybe NC State will change that. What are they, an 11 seed?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That would be
2 1s, a 4, and an 11.
Yeah.
Till next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Coachable Wealth, brought to you by Morton Brown Family Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor. This podcast is designed for educational and informational purposes and not intended as investment advice. More information can be found at www.mortonbrownfw.com.